Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. And on today's tutorial, we're going to be talking about Python, a basic history of Python. So we're just going to cover the basics, the fundamentals, the rudiments of Python. Okay, so we're going to look at indentation. We're going to look at variable names, the do's and don'ts of variable names. We're going to look at syntax of Python. We're going to look at data types. We're going to look at booleans, operators, casting, and numbers in Python. So for this tutorial, I expect you to have the basic understanding of programming, and I need you to also have installed Python in your environments. It comes pre-installed, but if you're having any issues, I have a couple of links in my bio to help you out with setting up Python, and I'll be using VS Code for this class. So I would expect you to have VS Code installed, and if also you can't do that or you don't have that installed, you have a link in my bio to help you out, explain how to install a step-by-step procedure of Visual Studio Code for Python. Let's get straight into it. So we're going to be looking at the history. Python is a popular programming language. It is used for web development, software development, mathematics system, and scripting. So what can Python do is what you'll be thinking. Python can be used on a server to create web applications, which is what we'll be doing in the course of this tutorial. Python can be used alongside softwares to create workflows. Python can connect to database systems like MySQL, Alchemy, MongoDB, Firebase, and a whole lot more. Python can be used to handle big data and perform complex mathematics. You often see most people that are into data analysis use Python for working with big data. So you can use Python for rapid prototyping and for production-ready software development. Next, we need to know why we need to use Python as compared to other programming languages. So Python works on a whole lot of different platforms like Windows, Mac, Linux, Raspberry Pi, and others. Python has a very simple syntax, similar to English language. So when you're writing Python, it's almost like you're speaking English because your concept, your code base is almost in English, but it has this fluent touch of mathematics and English mixed together. So Python has a syntax that allows developers to write programs with fewer lines than some other programming languages. So you get to see how we could write some code in Python as compared to other languages, and you see how it's easy to write a code in Python than in other languages. Python runs an interpreter system, meaning that code can be executed as soon as it's written. So this means that prototyping can be very, very quick. You can run your code immediately you write it up. Okay, so Python can be treated in a procedural way, and you can also use Python in an object-oriented way or a functional way. So it tell you that Python supports OOP, and it's also supports functional programming. Next, we're going to be looking at what we need to know, the basic information of Python. So the most recent version of Python is Python 3, which we'll be using for this tutorial. But we also have Python 2 in existence, and most systems use Python 2. But there is not much difference. It's just a couple of features that's been updated on Python 3. So I would highly recommend you use Python 3 for your tutorials and your coding exercise in the course of this tutorial. So in this tutorial, we'll be writing hours in Visual Studio Code. I was supposed to edit this here. So, but you can write Python anywhere in any IDE you find yourself using. So we have Tony, PyCharm, NetBeans, and Eclipse. We have a whole lot more. But for this tutorial, I encourage you all to use VS Code to write your code. So now let's compare Python syntax to other programming languages. So Python was designed for readability and has similarities to English, like I said earlier on. So Python uses new lines to complete a command, and as opposed to other programming languages, which often uses semicolon and parentheses. If you have code in other languages, you would observe this. But if it's your first time here, um no differences. I'm just going to take it one step at a time. So other languages require you to use Python. So if you observed, I kind of took a pause there. I had to fix something on my system. So we were on Python syntax compared to other programming languages. So I was saying in the last part of the video about how Python uses new line to complete a command, and as opposed to other programming languages, we often uses columns, semicolons, and parentheses. So in other languages, you would see semicolons and parentheses, which is used to end a code. But with Python, simply moving to the next line ends a command on that line. You would see more practical use of what I'm trying to say in the next slides, where we'll be going into the coding exercises we have for this tutorial. So Python relies on indentation, which explains why you need to understand how each line ends on a particular code. So Python relies on indentation, uses white space. So white space is very, very important in Python. So the number of spaces you leave helps Python understand your hierarchy, your structure, where things need to fall in place in your code. So you use it to define the scope, such as the scope of loops, functions, and classes, what I was trying to say. So your spacing is very, very important in Python because it helps Python, understand the logic of your application. So other programming languages use curly braces for this purpose. That's to indicate where a function or a class or a loop lies. But with Python, we use indentation. So you indent your code to break it down to the functions and the classes. So for this class, I have a couple of code for this class. So this is my screen. So in my screen here, I have a couple of exercises we'll be going to use to understand the basic syntax of Python. So for Python, the basic way to print to your console is to use the hello world. This is straight the basic thing you would see yourself using Python to do most of the time when you're learning Python or any programming language. Hello world is what they teach you how to do on your first day in a programming language. So now don't be confused with my screen. So what I have here is Visual Studio Code. I said that in the beginning of this class is what I'm going to be using to teach my Python tutorials and other tutorials coming up. So this is my terminal here. I'm going to explain everything to you. I'm going to take it okay, it's your first time here. So this is my terminal here. So I would be printing my results here in my terminal. So I'm using Visual Studio Code, and we have a whole lot others of IDE for you to use to learn Python. But for this class, I'm going to be using IDE for Visual Studio Code. So given your current version of OS, you probably would have Python pre-installed. Okay, so a quick way to run a check on your terminal to know if you have Python installed or not is just to come to your terminal here, and you would type Python dash version. So you should see the latest version of Python on your system. Mine is on a 3.10.4 version. This is the latest version as of now of me making this video. It might be different when you check yours, but anything within 3 points is fine. Okay, so if you have any challenges running Python on your system or confirming your version, I have a link for you in the bio. Okay, so I'm going to go straight into what the first line of code here is. We have this print hello world. This is the basic way to print a code in Python to display some text in your terminal. So when I run this, you would see in my terminal hello world displays in my terminal here, hello world. So this is our first code. This makes you feel like you have learned something serious in Python, but trust me, it gets more fun than this. Okay, so let's talk about indentation. So indentation refers to the spaces at the beginning of your code. Okay, so now look at my line of code here, line 1. I have no space. So if I give a tab, I use the tab key here to make a space, or I could just go back and write a couple of spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is indentation in Python. Okay, so in other programming languages, indentation in code is for readability only. You understand? The indentation in Python is very, very important. With indentation, it helps us to understand certain logic of the code, like I said earlier on. Okay, so the number of spaces is up to you as a programmer to use, but it's general practice to use 4 spaces when indenting your code. So you could use the tab key to give 4 spaces like this, or you could just use the space bar to give 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces on your code. Okay, so Python uses indentation to construct your code, to give your code its syntax to run, to understand the basic structure of your code. Okay, so now let's look at comments in Python, and let's look at how it works. So comments can be used to explain your Python code. Before we get into comments, I was talking about indentation, and I want to use this line of code here to explain indentation to you. So I'm going to uncomment this. So comments is going to be my next part. You understand why I'm using the hash key here to highlight my code and turn it to a comment. So now if you look at my code base here, you would see that this print key is moved inside, and this if is on the first space. So indentation is basically this in Python. This is what indentation means in Python. So if you're going to be indenting your code, this is what Python expects of you to do in your code base. So now, what am I trying to do here? Don't be confused about the whole code here. I'm just trying to explain the indentation purpose to you here. The aim of this snippet of code is to print to my console this results: 5 is greater than 2 if 5 is greater than 2 in my logic here. Okay, so in my logic here, I have a test to know if 5 is greater than 2. You could change it to be anything. It goes more complex when you are building enterprise applications and all. So now for this to run, I would have to make sure that this is inside the if statement, because dropping this on the same line with the if statement tells Python that these are two different codes. But when I push this inside, I'm telling Python that this print statement is the result that should be executed if this condition is correct. So I'm going to save my code and run it in the console for you to see a quick one. So you see 5 is greater than 2 in the console here. Yeah, so that's to tell you that, okay, this is true. 5 is greater than 2. Now, if I move this back to the same line and I save my code and I run it, I'm just trying to give you an error here. You see that, okay, indentation error is sorry, indentation error 5, indentation error, expected an indented block. You understand? So it's trying to tell you that, okay, there's a problem there. It expects a block. That's, you need you to indent this block here on line 3. So by indenting the block, I fix the code back, and when I save and run, I should see 5 is greater than 2. Voila, down here. So I'm going to clear my screen and we're going to go back to comments. So here is, we're talking about comments in the previous section before I took a break. So for comments is basically a way of you to explain your code. Comments breaks each part of your code for another person to understand what is occurring there if you are having a very large code base. So comments can be used to make your code more readable. Comments can be used to prevent execution from running, like what I'm doing in this tutorial here. I have all my code commented out, then the one I want to use, I would uncomment it to show you what the code will do at a certain time. So to create a comment, like you have seen in my code here, you use the hash symbol, which is this one in front of every key. Now to uncomment it is basically to remove the hash key. But you see on line 4 now, this is a comment. So I'm trying to just show you how it is being used. So printing to the system can be placed at the end of a line, like you see here. Now a comment does not have to be a text that explains the code. You understand? It can also be used to prevent certain codes from running. I said that earlier on. So Python does not really have a syntax for multiple line comments. So to add a multiple line comment, you would need to create a symbol, that's the hash key symbol for each line of that code, to create your multiple line comment. But we have a tweak in the middle. Sorry, I say tweak. So we have a tweak in the middle to try and, like, get a concept of multiple line comments. So since Python ignores string literals that are not assigned to a variable, you can use a multiple line string, that's triple quotes. I'm going to show you very soon what that is here. So if you use triple quotes in Python, you are trying to tell the Python that this is a string, a multiple line string. So to use a multiple line string in Python, you would have to go like this: one more, then you will take out a couple of them out, then you have 3 comments there, then you write your code there, then you close it back with that same 3 comments. Do you see that the error line on my code base disappears? So to have multiple line, so whatever I write in between this place, Python is going to take it as a comment. You understand? So this is another way of trying to get multiple line comments in Python. So moving up, we're going to be looking at variables. So variables are how will I explain it? Variables are data banks. They are like containers for storing data or value, as the case may be. So variables are Python's way of storing data in your. I'm going to scratch that and take it back. So variables are containers for storing data values. I don't want to use too much language there because this is a beginner's class. So variables are containers for storing data values. Variables in Python can be defined on line 9 like this. We have x is equals to 4 here. So this 4 is an integer. I will explain what integers are subsequently in this tutorial. So a variable is created the moment you assign a value to it. So when I remove this value here, I'm just basically initiating a variable. But the moment I add a value here, I'm saying that okay, x is equals to 4. I am declaring a variable and assigning a value to the variable. Okay, so variables do not need to be declared with any particular type in Python. Like you don't need to say what data type you're creating from the onset. You could just create a data type by assigning it to a value, a variable, as the case may be. So you can even change the value subsequently in your code. You could come back and also change your you could also come back and change your value here to a string, as the case may be. So Python does not really have a rule that declares you to initiate the data type of a variable before you can assign a value to that variable. Okay, so now let's look at this my code here. X, like I said, is equals to 4 here. You understand? And it's of type integer. I did that before. And here you look at this place, you see that I'm changing the value of x again to say Sally. Now x is now a string. So now if I come here and print x, I'm going to come back to line 11 shortly. If I come back here and print x, I will have to uncomment this part of the code and show you what I'm trying to say here. So now when I save this code base, what I expect to see on my screen is x is equals to Sally. Okay, so when I run my code, I see Sally. So this is just trying to tell you that you could change the value of a variable at any given time in Python without having to declare a data type for that variable. So now take note that Python is case sensitive. So this x means something entirely in Python compared to the lower x. Okay, so you see this small x here says that this is a different variable and this is a different variable. So you don't expect this and this to run the same code base. So you need to take note of um, case numbering, case sensitivity in Python. So you need to make sure your cases are always the same. If you're going to use lowercase or uppercase, it needs to be the same at all levels. So I can use I have something called the type function here. If I want to know the data type I am using at a given time, I can just use the type function here. I could say let me come back into the print statement so you would see it on the console. So if I could say if I say here type and I pass in the variable in here, I save that and I run it, you would see class string. This is just a clear explanation that Python changes not just the value, but the data type of that variable. So now let's look at the naming conventions in Python. So for that, I'm going to clear up this so you don't mix it up with the previous code. So I'm going to comment this before we move on. So I have this. So I don't want the code to reflect in the next thing I'm going to teach you. So you have a clear fact of what I'm trying to show you than the other code displaying there. So now we're looking at the naming conventions in Python. So a variable can have a short name like X and Y, or a very descriptive name like age, car name, total, sum, date of birth and stuff like that. So now we have certain rules in Python. Okay, so for naming your data your variable name, you have certain conventions you have to use. If not, you have an error on your screen. So for Python, a variable name must start with a letter or an underscore. Okay, so it must start with a letter here, my var, or it can start with an underscore as you see on line 16. Okay, now a variable name cannot start with a number, I will show you that now. We have a number here. So you see this two my var, it's an illegal way of naming your variables. So a variable name can only contain alphanumeric characters and underscores, as you see from line 14 to line 19. Okay, so we have variable names are case sensitive. I said that earlier on, how case sensitive is a very serious thing in Python and other programming languages. You don't just change between your uppercase and lowercase when using a variable name in Python. You must ensure that whatever um, uppercase or lowercase situation you are going to be using, convention you're going to be using, you stick to it throughout your code to avoid any error. Okay, so variable names can not be keywords. So there are certain keywords in Python, like this print keyword I showed you earlier on. You can't name your variable a keyword in Python. So now this are allowed variable name conventions in Python. You could use my name here. You could use an underscore here. You could use an underscore to start your variable name. You could mix uppercase and lowercase here. Okay, you could make it all uppercase. Then you could also add a number at the end of your variable name. You don't have to start it from the first thing should not be a number, sorry, because the moment you make a first thing a number, you're going to have an error. So these are examples of illegal variable names we have in Python that would throw an error. So let me give you an instance. Let me uncomment this code here. It should give me an error. I'm using an extension to help me detect some basic errors in Python. That way you get to see this red line in my code base. So if you look up here, you see that you have some explanations for what is going on at that possible place. You understand? So now this is a wrong naming convention in Python. Okay, so now there are several techniques you could want to use to mix between uppercase and lowercase. Okay, so we have the camel case where each word, but the first one starts with a capital letter. So a camel case in Python is going to look like this. This is a camel case in Python where you would use the first key. So in Python or any programming language of your choice, so once you use the capital M here, this is a camel case Python. Okay, so that's each word, but the first word have a capital letter. Okay, so camel case, sorry, is this my var. This is an example of a camel case in Python. So each word, except the first word. So I'm going to have another thing. My var name is this. Okay, so now if you observe here, each word here is being declared with a capital alphabet, but the first one here, my, which is lowercase. Okay, so this is an example of camel casing. So for Pascal casing, the only difference is that each word starts with a capital letter. So I'm going to just change this to capital M, and you have it as my var name is this key. So this is an example of Pascal case. Okay, so each word starts with a capital letter. So this is a clear distinction between camel case and Pascal case. So for the next item we're going to be looking at is the snake case. So for the snake case, we have it here. This is an example of a snake case. So what does it mean by a snake case? You just have to separate each of your characters with an underscore. Here is an example. So as you can see, I am separating each of my words with an underscore. This is an example of a snake case in Python. Okay, so moving on to assigning variables in Python. So another way of assigning variables in Python is to do a multiple variable assignment. So on line 31 here, you look at this. I'm going to comment this out. So on this line, we have x is equals to xyz is equals to orange, banana, and cherry. So rather than going to declare and assign variables line by line, you could do it on a multiple. You could do multiple assignments on one line where each of this Python we understand that you're trying to do a multiple line assignment and assign each of these variables to each of these values to each of the variables here. So you would see that we have, when I print this to the console, 1 minute, I print this to the console, you would see that we are having each value in each variable. Okay, you see orange, banana, cherry. So Python understands that you are trying to assign a value to each of these variables. Okay, so that's what it's done here. So you could still just break it down and say y is equal to banana, as the case may be, but it's going to be time wastage and you are not coding in a conventional way. So we were trying to explain how to assign multiple values to multiple variable names. So this is how you would go about it. Then the next item is how to assign a single variable to multiple variables. Okay, so this is how we have it here. So let me uncomment this part of code and show you how you can assign multiple values, multiple variables to a single value. So in the last part, I showed you how to assign multiple variables to multiple values, but here we're going to be just assigning multiple variables to a single variable. Okay, so understand that a variable is a data bank, is a container for information. Now the value here is orange, so you always have to take note the difference between value and variable. Don't get it twisted. We're going to be using terminologies like that in programming. So now here, what I did here is just to assign a single variable, a single value to three variables. Even me, I'm mixing it up already. So now when I print to my console, let me clear this up. Let me clear this up. You would see that X, Y, Z all represent the same value here. So this is how to assign a single value to multiple variables. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at built-in data types. So what kind of data types do we have in Python? Because a whole lot of data types are available to us here, and they are not always the same in other programming languages. So you would see that the data type you're using here, it's just, mainly they are the same in my own view, but the naming convention is different. In some languages, you get to see them as char, as the case may be, but in here you get to see them as string and other things. So for Python, these are the allowed data types. So we have for text, if you're going to be using text for your variable, you're going to be using string. This is a data type that is allowed. So for numbers, where you see us using numbers in our previous examples, we have numbers for int. If you're going to be using decimals, we have them for floats. Then complex is for complex numbers. Okay, so we have also list, tuple, and ranges. Then we have for mapping, we have the dictionary, the dict. Then for the set types, we have the set, the frozen set, the boolean, which is for true or false. We have the bool. Then for binary, we have the byte array, the memory view. Then for the non-type, it's a different type of data type. It's also available to us in Python. So some of these things were recently released for Python. So that's why you get to see a whole lot more. But back in the days, we had a few to work with. So you get to see yourself working mostly with string, and that's the text type, the numeric type, the sequence, the mapping, and the boolean. You barely, also the set sometimes, but you barely get to work with binary types and non-type. It's on rare occasions you get to work with those ones, but we're going to work with most of them in this our code so that you will get to see how they are used. Okay, then afterwards we're going to be looking at now Python operators. So Python has a lot of operators available to us. So if you want to add numbers in Python, like I want to print the sum of two numbers in Python, I would use the plus symbol to add, which is an arithmetic operator in Python. So you're going to look something like this. So I want to print this to my console. So if I run a plus um, a run key here, I see that I have a sum of 15. So it allows for a whole lot of other operators, which we're going to be looking at now. So I don't want to add this and this manually to see what it gives me in Python, but we could do that dynamically moving on. So we have Python operators. We have the arithmetic operator here. We have the plus, the minus, the asterisk, which is the multiplication. We have the division, the modulus, the raised to the power. Then we have for assignment operators, we have the equal to. Now assignment operators, what this does is that it assigns, like we've used assignment operators in different instances of our tutorial. Like here, this is an assignment operator, the equal to. So for the assignment operator, it just assigns a value to a variable. So we have the increments, the decrements, we have all this available to us as assignment operators. We have the comparison operator. This now checks to see, this double equal to here checks to see if the two entities are of the same value and data type. Okay, so we have the not equal to, we have the greater than, the less than, the greater than or equal to. We have the logical operator, the and or not. We have the identity operator, the is not. We have the membership operators, the in, the not in, and we have the bitwise operators. So I don't want to go too much for this first tutorial. I just wanted to show you guys operators, data types, variables, strings, multiple line of strings, and how to print to the console, indentation, and the basic syntax in Python. For my next class, which I'm going to be talking about lists, tuples, sets, and dictionaries, I would take each of these modules one after the other and explain how they are being used in Python and how to have a better understanding of what to the scenarios of where you would have to use a list in place of a tuple and the advantages of one another. So this was just a basic introduction into Python, and hope to see you in the next class. Cheers.